Hey, beggar girl in the rain, begs the millionaire. Sir, can I sleep in your car tonight? Those words struck him deeply, and what he does next will move you completely, so watch until the end. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The rain fell in steady sheets over Manhattan's glass towers, turning the evening traffic into a blur of red taillights and yellow cabs. Inside his Range Rover autobiography, Marcus Sterling absently adjusted his Italian silk tie while reviewing quarterly projections on his tablet. The latest acquisition of Sterling Enterprises was making headlines again, and tomorrow's board meeting would require his full attention. A gentle tap on the window interrupted his thoughts. Through the rain-streaked glass, he saw a small figure, a girl, probably no more than 12, drenched from head to toe in oversized clothes that hung like heavy curtains on her thin frame. Her eyes, large and dark, held a mixture of desperation and dignity that made him pause. The rational part of his brain, the part that had built a multi-billion-dollar empire, screamed at him to ignore her, just like he ignored the dozens of other street vendors and beggars that approached his car daily. But something was different about this one. She wasn't holding out a cup or a sign. She just stood there looking at him with those eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Marcus found himself lowering the window slightly, against his better judgment. The sound of rain grew louder. "Sir, can I sleep in your car tonight?" The girl's voice was barely above a whisper, almost lost in the patter of raindrops. The request struck him like a physical blow. Not money for food, not spare change for shelter, but the simple, devastating request for a safe place to sleep. In his 20 years of building his corporate empire, no one had ever asked him for something so basic, so human. The traffic light turned green. Horns blared behind him. Marcus made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. He unlocked the passenger door. The girl hesitated for a moment, as if she couldn't believe he'd actually agreed, then quickly slipped inside. Water dripped from her clothes onto the leather seat, but Marcus found he didn't care. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, as if trying to take up as little space as possible. "What's your name?" he asked, pulling away from the intersection. "Sarah," she replied, then added quickly, "I'll leave first thing in the morning. I promise I won't cause any trouble." Marcus glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. She was smaller than he'd initially thought, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair plastered to her face by the rain. There was something familiar about her features that he couldn't quite place. "Are you hungry?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Sarah shook her head, but her stomach betrayed her with a quiet growl. A ghost of a smile flickered across Marcus's face as he directed the car toward his favorite Italian restaurant in the Upper East Side. The maitre d' at La Famiglia did a double take when Marcus Sterling, one of New York's most eligible bachelors and a regular patron, walked in with a soaking, wet child in tow. But one look from Marcus silenced any questions. They were led to his usual private booth, and Sarah's eyes widened at the crystal chandeliers and Renaissance paintings that adorned the walls. "Order whatever you like," Marcus said, handing her a menu. She held it reverently as if it might dissolve in her hands. I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "You're not," he replied, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "Everyone needs help sometimes." As Sarah cautiously ordered simple spaghetti with marinara sauce, Marcus found himself studying her more closely. There was an intelligence in her eyes that belied her circumstances, and her manners, though clearly unpracticed, suggested someone who had once known a different life. What he didn't know then was that this rain-soaked encounter was just the beginning. He couldn't have imagined how this simple act of kindness would ripple through his carefully constructed world, challenging everything he thought he knew about success, family, and the true cost of the empire he'd built. The night wrapped around them like a soft blanket as they ate in comfortable silence, the rain continuing its gentle symphony against the restaurant's windows. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something shift inside him. A crack in the armor he'd built around his heart, letting in a warmth he'd long forgotten existed. The following morning, Marcus woke to find Sarah tidying his penthouse's kitchen. She had somehow managed to figure out his complex coffee maker and had a fresh cup waiting for him. The sight stopped him in his tracks. This child, who had nothing, was trying to make herself useful instead of asking for more. "You didn't have to do this," he said, accepting the coffee. "I wanted to," she replied simply, wiping down an already spotless counter. "Thank you for letting me stay. I'll leave now." Marcus looked at her worn backpack by the door, so small it could barely hold a change of clothes, and made another impulsive decision. "Where will you go?" Sarah's hand stilled on the counter. "There are places," she said vaguely, but her voice wavered slightly. "Stay," he found himself saying, "at least until we can figure something out." Her eyes met his, suspicious and hopeful, all at once. Why? It was a fair question, one that Marcus himself couldn't fully answer. His assistant, Patricia Chen, arrived shortly after, stopping dead in her tracks at the sight of Sarah sitting at the breakfast bar, quietly eating cereal. "Mr. Sterling?" Patricia's voice held a mixture of confusion and concern. She'd been with him for 15 years, managing both his business and personal life with impeccable efficiency. This was definitely not in her carefully maintained schedule. "Patricia, clear my morning," Marcus said, finishing his coffee, "and find me the best family lawyer in the city." Patricia's eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. "Of course. Anything else?" "Yes, we'll need some clothes for Sarah and school supplies." He glanced at Sarah, who was trying to make herself invisible behind her cereal bowl. "And perhaps a child psychologist." After Patricia left, clearly struggling to process this unexpected turn of events, Sarah spoke up. "You don't have to do any of this." "I know," Marcus replied, sitting beside her, "but sometimes we do things not because we have to, but because we should." The next few days passed in a blur of appointments and arrangements. The family lawyer, Elizabeth Blackwood, raised every possible red flag about taking in an unidentified minor. The child psychologist, Dr. Rivera, gently suggested that Sarah might have experienced significant trauma. Social services were notified. Background checks were initiated, and the wheels of bureaucracy began to turn. But what surprised Marcus most was how naturally Sarah seemed to fit into his life. She was quiet but observant, solving the New York Times crossword puzzle while he worked, asking thoughtful questions about his business calls, and somehow knowing when he needed silence. It wasn't until the end of the week that the first real challenge appeared. Marcus was in his home office when Patricia rushed in, looking concerned. "The press got wind of it," she said, handing him her tablet. The headline made his heart sink. "Sterling Enterprises CEO harboring mysterious child, scandal or salvation." The Sikh's article was filled with speculation and innuendo, questioning his motives and suggesting various unsavory scenarios. As he read, he could hear Sarah in the next room, humming softly while reading one of the books she'd found in his library. "What do you want me to do?" Patricia asked, already preparing for damage control. Marcus set down the tablet and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. His entire career had been built on careful calculation and risk management. Taking in Sarah had been the first truly spontaneous decision he'd made in decades. Now facing potential scandal and business repercussions, he should have been worried about shareholder confidence and stock prices. Instead, he found himself thinking about the way Sarah's face lit up when she discovered his collection of classic literature, how she left little thank you notes on his desk, and how she tried so hard not to be a burden that it broke his heart. "Call the board," he said finally. "I'll address this head-on." "Are you sure?" Patricia asked. "We could try to minimize the exposure, maybe send her to a proper facility until things quiet down." "No," Marcus cut her off, his voice firm. "She stays. Everything else we'll handle." As if on cue, Sarah appeared in the doorway, holding a worn copy of Great Expectations. Her eyes darted between Marcus and Patricia, and he could see her preparing herself for rejection, already reaching for her backpack. "Sarah," Marcus called softly, "how would you like to learn about business strategy? I could use a fresh perspective on this situation." The smile that slowly spread across her face was worth more than any stock portfolio he'd ever managed. As she settled into the chair across from his desk, Marcus realized that sometimes the biggest risks in life weren't about money or power. but about opening your heart to unexpected possibilities. The Sterling Enterprises boardroom fell silent as Marcus finished his presentation. 14 pairs of eyes stared at him with varying degrees of disbelief and concern. He had just spent 45 minutes explaining his decision to become Sarah's temporary guardian, laying out his plans for handling both the media situation and the legal implications. "Let me get this straight," Richard Holloway, his longest-serving board member, leaned forward, in his leather chair. "You're willing to risk everything we've built over a homeless child. The press is already having a field day with this, Marcus. Our stock dropped 3 points this morning alone." Marcus remained standing, his posture relaxed but authoritative. "I understand your concerns, Richard, but this isn't just about Sarah. It's about who we are as a company. We've always claimed to value social responsibility." "Social responsibility means creating jobs and paying taxes," interrupted Victoria Chang, head of Asian operations, "not turning the CEO's life into a charity case reality show." Before Marcus could respond, the boardroom door opened and Patricia slipped in, her face pale. She hurried to Marcus's side and whispered something in his ear. The color drained from his face. "Excuse me," he said, gathering his papers. "We'll continue this discussion later." He found Sarah in his office, curled up in his leather chair, clutching a photograph she'd found in one of his old files. Dr. Rivera, the child psychologist, stood nearby, her expression grave. "She had a panic attack when she saw it," Dr. Rivera explained softly. "I think we need to discuss what triggered this reaction." Marcus gently took the photograph from Sarah's trembling hands. It was an old company photo from about 7 years ago, showing the opening of Sterling Enterprises' research division. His breath caught as he focused on one particular face in the crowd, a woman with dark eyes remarkably similar to Sarah's. "Her name was Elena Martinez," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "She was my mother." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena Martinez, he remembered her now, a brilliant researcher who had worked in his company's developmental department. She had mysteriously resigned 7 years ago, leaving no forwarding address. The details of her departure were fuzzy in his memory, handled by HR and legal departments. "Sarah," he said carefully, kneeling beside the chair, "why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes, so much like her mother's, filled with tears. "I wasn't sure at first. Then I was afraid you'd send me away if you knew. Mom always said the company that things weren't what they seemed." Dr. Rivera cleared her throat softly. "Mr. Sterling, I believe Sarah is experiencing complex trauma related to her mother's disappearance. She needs stability now more than ever." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. Elena Martinez's resignation had coincided with a major corporate restructuring. He'd been so focused on global expansion that he'd left the details to his management team. What had really happened? And why had Elena disappeared, leaving her daughter to fend for herself? "Sarah," he said gently, "I promise you I'm going to find out what happened, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Mom used to say you were different from the others. That's why I chose your car that night. I recognized you from her old photos." The weight of this revelation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Marcus realized that Sarah's appearance in his life hadn't been entirely random. It was a thread connecting him to a past he'd overlooked, to decisions made in his name that he'd never questioned. Patricia appeared in the doorway again, her expression worried. "Mr. Sterling, the board is demanding an immediate resolution, and the press is gathering in the lobby." Marcus looked at Sarah, then at the photograph in his hands. In that moment, he made a decision that would shake Sterling Enterprises to its core. "Patricia, call Elizabeth Blackwood. Tell her to begin formal adoption proceedings immediately." "Marcus," Patricia gasped, forgetting formality in her shock. "The board will never—" "The board doesn't make decisions about my family," he interrupted firmly, "and Sarah is family now." Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief and hope. For the first time since she'd entered his life, a real smile broke across her face, bright, beautiful, and full of possibilities. But even as Marcus returned her smile, he knew the real battle was just beginning. Somewhere in his company's past lay the truth about Elena Martinez, and finding it would mean confronting powers he'd never known existed within his own empire. The next morning, Marcus's private elevator opened to reveal chaos in his executive suite. Patricia was juggling 3 phones while his PR team huddled around their laptops, looking increasingly distressed. The news of his adoption plans had leaked. "The major shareholders are threatening to call an emergency meeting," Patricia reported, covering one phone's mouthpiece. "And there's something else. Someone's been accessing old personnel files, specifically everything related to Elena Martinez." Marcus nodded, unsurprised. He'd spent most of the night reviewing what little information he could find about Elena. Her employee file was surprisingly thin, with many details either missing or heavily redacted. It was as if someone had systematically erased her presence from the company's records. "Where's Sarah?" he asked, scanning the room. "With Dr. Rivera in the private conference room. They're working on her school enrollment papers." Patricia hesitated. "Marcus, there's something you should see." She handed him a tablet open to a financial news site. The headline made his blood run cold. "Sterling Enterprises board members question CEO's mental stability. Emergency leadership review pending." Before he could respond, Elizabeth Blackwood, his lawyer, strode into the office. Her usually impeccable appearance was slightly disheveled, suggesting she'd been working through the night. "We have a problem," she announced without preamble. "The adoption petition is being challenged. Someone's claiming to be Sarah's legal guardian, a woman named Isabella Rodriguez. She says she's Elena Martinez's sister." Marcus felt the floor shift beneath his feet. Sarah never mentioned an aunt. "That's because she doesn't have one," Sarah's voice came from behind them. She stood in the doorway, Dr. Rivera beside her. "My mother was an only child. She told me never to trust anyone who claimed to be family." The room fell silent as Sarah walked to Marcus's side. Despite her young age, she carried herself with a dignity that reminded him startlingly of Elena. "There's more," Elizabeth continued, glancing uncertainly at Sarah. "This Isabella Rodriguez has significant backing. The paperwork she's filed is flawless, supported by several prominent child welfare organizations and," she paused, "3 members of your board." The pieces began falling into place in Marcus's mind. Someone wanted Sarah gone badly enough to create an elaborate fiction, the same someone who had probably been responsible for Elena's disappearance years ago. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Rivera spoke up, "Sarah has shared some concerning memories about her mother's last days at Sterling Enterprises. I believe they may be relevant." Sarah's hand found Marcus's, squeezing it tightly. "Mum was working on something big, something that made people nervous. She used to write everything in a special notebook. She called it her insurance policy." "A notebook?" Marcus asked, his mind racing. Sarah nodded. "She hid it somewhere, in the building before she left. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should find someone trustworthy in the company and tell them about the green notebook with the butterfly sticker." Patricia gasped softly. "The old R&D archive room. Elena always worked late there, said she liked the quiet." Marcus made a quick decision. "Patricia, cancel everything. Elizabeth, delay any legal proceedings as long as possible. Dr. Rivera, please stay with Sarah. I need to visit our archives." But Sarah stepped forward, her chin raised determinedly. "I'm coming with you. Mum said we'd know who to trust because they'd have kind eyes like yours. She was right about you. Please don't make me stay behind." Looking into those familiar dark eyes, Marcus realized that this wasn't just about protecting Sarah anymore. This was about uncovering the truth that Elena had tried to expose, a truth that some people would do anything to keep buried. "All right," he agreed, "but you stay close to me." As they walked toward the elevator, Patricia called out, "Marcus, the board meeting starts in an hour. If you're not there..." He turned back, his expression resolute. "Then they'll have to decide my fate without me. Some things are more important than keeping my job." The elevator doors closed on the sight of his empire potentially crumbling, but Marcus felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, he knew with absolute certainty that he was doing the right thing. The R&D archive room was located In the building's sub-basement, a maze of climate-controlled storage units filled with decades of research documents. Marcus used his executive override to access the secure area, the fluorescent lights flickering to life as they entered. "Mom spent a lot of time here," Sarah whispered, her hand still firmly clasped in his. She said the answers were always in the details everyone else overlooked. Marcus surveyed the rows of metal shelving units stretching into the distance. "Do you remember anything specific about where she might have hidden the notebook?" Sarah closed her eyes, concentrating. She liked the butterfly section, something about metamorphosis being the perfect metaphor. The biotech division, Marcus realized. They were working on environmental adaptation projects 7 years ago. They made their way through the archive until they reached Section B7, marked Biological Technologies and Environmental Research. Sarah suddenly stopped, pointing to a shelf near the ceiling. "There," she said. "Mom always looked up there when she thought no one was watching." Marcus pulled over a rolling ladder and climbed up. The top shelf was dusty, filled with old bound reports and technical manuals. As he ran his hand along the back of the shelf, his fingers caught on something taped to the underside, a small key. "Sarah," he called down, "was there anything else about the notebook? Any other clues your mother might have given you?" "She had a butterfly collection in her office," Sarah replied. "Real specimens in glass cases. She donated them to the company before she left." Marcus descended the ladder, examining the key. It looked like it belonged to a display case or small cabinet. "Patricia," he spoke into his phone, "where did Elena Martinez's office butterfly collection end up?" There was a pause. Then Patricia's voice crackled through. "According to the inventory, it's in the executive floor's historical display room. But Marcus, the board meeting started 5 minutes ago. They're talking about invoking the emergency succession clause." "Keep them busy," he replied. "I'm close to something." The historical display room was a point of pride for Sterling Enterprises, showcasing significant artifacts from the company's past. They found the butterfly collection in a corner, 12 beautiful specimens mounted under glass, their wings spread in eternal flight. Sarah approached the display reverently, pressing her hand against the glass. Mom said butterflies reminded her that beautiful things take time and that sometimes you have to break free to become what you're meant to be. Marcus examined the display case carefully. Behind the mounted butterflies, he noticed a slight gap in the backing. The key fit perfectly into a hidden lock, and with a soft click, a concealed compartment opened. Inside lay a green notebook with a faded butterfly sticker on its cover. Before they could open it, a voice rang out from the doorway. "I'm afraid I can't let you read that." Richard Holloway stood there, flanked by 2 security guards. His usual genial expression was gone, replaced by something harder and colder. "The board has voted, Marcus. You've been temporarily relieved of your duties pending a psychological evaluation. This obsession with the girl and Elena Martinez's past, it ends now." Marcus stepped in front of Sarah, shielding her. "You knew about Elena all along, didn't you, Richard? What really happened 7 years ago?" "Progress requires sacrifice," Richard replied smoothly. "Eleanor understood that in the end. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Sarah's hand slipped into Marcus's suit pocket, retrieving his phone. While everyone's attention was on the confrontation, she quickly snapped several photos of the notebook's pages. "The company's reputation is at stake," Richard continued. "Think about the shareholders, the employees who depend on us. All that risked for what? A child's fairy tales about her mother's conspiracy theories?" Marcus felt Sarah's small hand. Squeeze his? A silent signal that she'd finished photographing the crucial pages. He carefully slid the notebook back into its hiding place. "You're right, Richard," he said calmly. "The company's reputation is important. That's why I've already sent copies of everything we've found to every major news outlet in the country." Richard's face paled. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Marcus smiled, though his heart was racing. "Would you like to test that theory? See how the public reacts to whatever Elena discovered? Or should we discuss this like reasonable people?" The tension in the room was electric. Sarah stood tall beside Marcus, her mother's daughter in every way, unafraid in the face of power. In that moment, Marcus knew that whatever was in that notebook, whatever truth Eleanor had tried to protect, it was worth fighting for. Richard's next words would determine whether that fight would happen in the boardroom or in the court of public opinion. The next 24 hours transformed Sterling Enterprises into a corporate battlefield. Marcus and Sarah had been escorted from the building, but not before Sarah had managed to email the photographs to Dr. Rivera's personal account. Contingency plan they'd quietly arranged while examining the notebook. Now sitting in Elizabeth Blackwood's office, they watched the story unfold on multiple news channels. The headlines were explosive. Sterling Enterprises Research Division under investigation. Whistleblower's daughter returns. CEO fights board for truth. The photos Sarah took are game changers, Elizabeth said, spreading printouts across her desk. Elena documented everything: unauthorized genetic modification experiments, environmental impact cover-ups, systematic suppression of safety concerns. She built an airtight case. But why didn't she come forward? Marcus wondered aloud, studying the meticulous notes. Sarah, who had been quietly reading in a corner, looked up. She tried. The last entry in her journal, she had a meeting scheduled with you, but someone else showed up instead. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He remembered that day vaguely. A calendar conflict, a last-minute rescheduling handled by his assistant. Not Patricia, he realized, but her predecessor, who had left the company shortly after Elena's disappearance. They isolated her, Sarah continued, her voice small but steady. Made her look unstable, paranoid, just like they're trying to do to you now. The television suddenly switched to breaking news. Isabella Rodriguez, the woman claiming to be Sarah's aunt, was giving an interview, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "I just want my niece back," she pleaded to the cameras. "Mr. Sterling is using this poor child to deflect from his company's problems. Sarah belongs with family." Marcus reached for the remote, but Sarah stopped him. "Wait," she said. "Look at her hands." On the screen, Isabella was clutching a photograph, presumably of Elena. But Sarah was pointing at something else, the way the woman's fingers moved in a distinct pattern while she spoke. "Mom taught me about micro-expressions and body language," Sarah explained. "She said knowing how to read people might save my life one day. That tapping pattern, it's the same one Richard Holloway does when he's lying in board meetings." Marcus leaned forward, studying the footage more carefully. The mannerism was subtle but unmistakable, the same nervous tell he'd observed in Richard countless times over the years. "Elizabeth," he said, "can you get me everything on Isabella Rodriguez? Birth records, employment history, anything." "Already on it," the lawyer replied. "But there's something else you need to see." She handed him a tablet open to an email. This just came from an anonymous source inside Sterling Enterprises. It's security footage from the day Elena disappeared. The video was grainy but clear enough to show Elena entering the building late at night, carrying the green notebook. She never came out. The timestamp, Marcus noted. This was the night before my scheduled meeting with her, the meeting she never made it to. Sarah moved to his side, watching the footage with an eerie calmness. She knew they might come for her. That's why she hid the notebook first. She chose to disappear to protect me. A knock at the office door made them all jump. Patricia entered, looking exhausted but determined. "I've been doing some digging," she said. "Isabella Rodriguez doesn't exist, at least not until 6 years ago. But I found this." She placed a photograph on Elizabeth's desk. It showed a younger Richard Holloway at a corporate retreat, his arm around a woman who looked remarkably like the aunt from the television. "That's Richard's former secretary," Marcus recognized her. "The one who handled my schedule changes." "Her name is Isabel Ruiz now," Patricia confirmed. "She's been working for a subsidiary company controlled by Richard's family trust." The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture more complex and disturbing than Marcus had imagined. This wasn't just about environmental violations or corporate misconduct. It was about power, control, and the lengths some people would go to maintain them. Sarah suddenly straightened, her expression shifting from contemplative to determined. "I want to make a statement," she announced. "On television. Let them try to discredit a child telling the truth about her own mother. Marcus started to protest, but the look in her eyes stopped him. It was Elena's look, the same fierce intelligence, the same unwavering courage. "They took everything from my mom because she stood alone," Sarah said softly. "I'm not alone, I have you." Elizabeth and Patricia exchanged glances, then began making calls. Within hours, they had arranged for Sarah to tell her story on the most respected news program in the country. As they prepared for the interview that would change everything, Marcus realized that his empire might crumble, his reputation might suffer, but something far more valuable had been built in their place, an unshakable trust between two people who had found each other in the rain. The television studio's green room was quiet, except for the soft hum of air conditioning. Sarah sat perfectly still while a makeup artist made final touches to her face, her eyes fixed on her reflection in the mirror. She looked older somehow, more like Elena than ever in the careful studio. "Lighting. You don't have to do this," Marcus said softly, standing behind her. "We can find another way." Sarah met his eyes in the mirror. "Mom always said that secrets grow in the dark. It's time to turn on the lights." Catherine Bennett, the veteran news anchor known for her uncompromising interviews, entered the room. Her presence commanded attention, but when she saw Sarah, her expression softened. "Are you ready?" she asked, sitting down beside the girl. "Remember, you can take your time. Just tell your story as you remember it." Sarah nodded, smoothing her navy blue dress, a miniature version of the professional attire Eleanor used to wear. "I'm ready." The studio lights were bright and hot as Sarah took her seat across from Catherine. Marcus watched from just off camera, his heart pounding. Elizabeth and Patricia stood beside him, all of them aware that the next hour would change everything. "Good evening," Catherine began, looking directly into the camera. "Tonight, we bring you an exclusive interview that may shake one of America's largest corporations to its core. With us is Sarah Martinez, the 12-year-old daughter of former Sterling Enterprises researcher Elena Martinez, and the child at the center of a growing controversy surrounding CEO Marcus Sterling." Sarah sat straighter as Catherine turned to her. "Sarah, tell us how you ended up at Marcus Sterling's car that rainy night." "I chose him," Sarah replied, her voice clear and steady. "I'd been watching the building for weeks, learning the patterns. Mom taught me to be observant, to look for the right moment, the right person. She had Mr. Sterling's picture in her journal with a note that said he doesn't know but he might listen. What exactly didn't Mr. Sterling know?" Sarah took a deep breath. "That his company was hurting people. Mom found evidence that some of Sterling's environmental research projects were making people sick in testing areas. When she tried to report it, they started watching her, following her, making her look crazy." Catherine leaned forward. "These are serious allegations. Do you have proof?" Mom documented everything in her green notebook. Dates, names, test results. She hid it in the building before she disappeared. She knew they might come for her, so she made sure the truth would survive. "And where is your mother now, Sarah?" A flicker of pain crossed Sarah's face. "I don't know. The last time I saw her, she hugged me and said sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. She left me with people she trusted, but they started disappearing too. That's when I learned to survive on my own." The interview continued, with Sarah methodically laying out the evidence they'd discovered. She explained the fake aunt, the board's manipulation, the years of corporate cover-ups. Her voice never wavered, even when describing her months on the street. But it was her description of Marcus that caught everyone off guard. "He could have ignored me that night," she said, glancing at him off camera. "Most people did, but he looked at me the same way Mom used to, like I was a person, not a problem. He listened, he helped, and when he found out who I really was, he didn't run away. He promised to find the truth, even though it might cost him everything." Catherine's expression was gentle but probing. "Some people suggest Mr. Sterling is using you to distract from corporate problems. How do you respond to that?" Sarah's eyes flashed with her mother's fire. Mr. Sterling built this company to help people. Mom believed in that mission. That's why she tried to stop the ones who were corrupting it. They're the ones using me, pretending to be my family, trying to shut us up. But Mom taught me that the truth always finds its way out, like a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. The metaphor hung in the air, powerful in its simplicity. Catherine turned to the camera. After the break, we'll hear from corporate governance, experts about the implications of Sarah's revelations, and we'll examine the evidence supporting her claims. As the studio lights dimmed for the commercial break, Sarah remained perfectly composed. But when Marcus approached her, she finally allowed herself to tremble slightly. "You did beautifully," he whispered, squeezing her shoulder. "They'll come after us harder now," she replied softly. "Let them try," Marcus said, his voice firm. "We've got something they don't." Sarah looked up at him questioningly. "The truth," he smiled, "and each other." What they didn't know yet was that across the city, in thousands of homes and offices, Sarah's words were already sparking a revolution. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the greatest power, especially when it speaks from the heart. The response to Sarah's interview was immediate and overwhelming. By morning, Sterling Enterprises' stock had plunged. Social media was ablaze, with Mahi Justice for Elena hashtags, and protesters gathered outside the corporate headquarters demanding answers. Marcus and Sarah watched the chaos unfold from the safety of his penthouse, which had become a makeshift command center. Elizabeth coordinated, with a team of lawyers, while Patricia managed the flood of media requests. Dr. Rivera stayed close to Sarah, monitoring her stress levels after the emotional strain of the interview. "Look at this," Patricia said, turning her laptop around. Former Sterling Enterprises employees were coming forward with their own stories, corroborating Eleanor's documentation. Scientists, researchers, administrative staff, each adding pieces to the puzzle Elena had tried to solve. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Rivera called from the living room where she'd been watching Sarah. "I think you should see this." Sarah sat cross-legged, on the floor surrounded by printouts of emails and documents that supporters had sent in. She was organizing them with the same methodical precision her mother had shown in her research, creating complex patterns that only she seemed to understand. "Mom used to do this," she explained, not looking up. She called it pattern recognition. "When you lay everything out, the connections become clear." She pointed to several documents. "These people all transferred to subsidiary companies within 3 months of raising concerns, and these facilities where the testing happened, they all trace back to shell corporations owned by the same investment group." Marcus knelt beside her, studying the patterns she'd identified. Richard's family trust, he realized. They've been using Sterling's resources and reputation to run unauthorized experiments through shadow companies. A breaking news alert interrupted them. Isabella Rodriguez, now exposed as Isabel Ruiz, had been caught trying to leave the country. More surprisingly, she'd turned herself in to federal investigators, offering to testify about years of corporate misconduct. "She's scared," Sarah observed, watching the footage. "Not of legal trouble, but of something else. Look at how she keeps glancing over her shoulder." Before Marcus could respond, his private elevator chimed. Patricia moved to block the entrance, but the doors opened to reveal Victoria Chang, the board member who had been one of his harshest critics. "I came alone," she said, holding up her hands, "and I came to help." The room tensed, but Sarah studied the woman carefully before saying, "She's telling the truth." Mom mentioned her in the notebook. She tried to support the initial investigation but was threatened into silence. Victoria's eyes widened. "How did you... Elena said you were special, but..." She composed herself. "Yes, they threatened. My family. But after seeing Sarah last night, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I have documents, recordings, everything they tried to bury." As Victoria shared her evidence, a new picture emerged. Richard Holloway and his allies hadn't just corrupted Sterling Enterprises. They'd created an elaborate network of research facilities, conducting unauthorized experiments, using the company's legitimate operations as cover. But why? Marcus wondered aloud. The company was already successful. "Power," Sarah said simply, still arranging her documents. "Mom wrote about it. They didn't want to make money. They wanted to control things. Medicine, agriculture, energy. They wanted to decide who got help and who didn't. Victoria nodded grimly. Eleanor discovered they were developing environmental manipulation technologies. They could make crops fail or succeed, influence weather patterns, create or solve resource scarcities, playing God for profit. Sarah suddenly went still, staring at a particular document. Mom knew where everything was happening. That's why they wanted her gone, and that's why, her voice caught, that's why she left me behind. She knew they'd watch me, waiting for her to make contact. Marcus felt his heart break at the realization. Elena had sacrificed everything, her career, her life with her daughter, perhaps even her life itself, to protect not just Sarah, but countless others who would have been affected by these experiments. Victoria pulled out her phone, showing them a secure email. Federal investigators are moving in on the research sites Elena identified. Richard and his core group will be arrested within hours, but she hesitated. There's something else, something about Elena. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes intense. She's alive, isn't she? In hiding, but alive. Victoria's surprise was evident. How did you know? Because, Sarah smiled, touching the butterfly pendant she always wore. She promised we'd find each other again when the chrysalis broke open, and Mom never broke her promises. The hope that filled the room was almost tangible. But even as they celebrated the impending justice, Marcus knew their journey wasn't over. Eleanor was still out there, and Sarah's fight to reclaim her family had only begun. As federal agents swarmed Sterling Enterprises' satellite facilities, Marcus and Sarah focused on a different mission, decoding the subtle clues Elena had left behind. They converted the penthouse's dining room into an investigation center, with Sarah's methodically arranged documents covering every surface. Mom was always teaching me about patterns, Sarah explained, pinning locations from Elena's notebook onto a large map. She said the world was full of hidden messages if you knew how to read them. Victoria Chang had provided them with access to Elena's old work computer, recovered from deep storage. While tech experts combed through encrypted files, Sarah focused on something seemingly mundane, her mother's old calendar. Look at these meeting entries, she said, pointing to recurring appointments. Every third Thursday she had lunch at different butterfly gardens across the city. But some of these places don't exist. Marcus studied the calendar entries. These coordinates, they're not garden locations, they're data points. He pulled up a mapping program, plotting the numbers hidden in Elena's calendar. She was marking something. Dr. Rivera, who had become an invaluable ally, watched Sarah work with professional admiration. Your mother prepared you for this, didn't she? All those lessons about patterns and observation, she was training you to find her. Sarah nodded, her fingers tracing lines between the points on the map. She knew they were watching her computer, her phone, everything. So she taught me to look for butterflies. She touched her pendant. Like this one, she gave it to me the day before she disappeared. Marcus had always assumed the pendant was just a cherished memento, but now he looked at it more carefully. The intricate silver butterfly seemed oddly heavy for its size. Sarah, he said slowly, may I see that? She hesitated only briefly before unclasping the necklace. Marcus examined it under a desk lamp, his fingers finding a nearly invisible seam along the butterfly's wing. With gentle pressure, it clicked open, revealing a tiny micro SD card. Patricia, who had been coordinating with federal investigators, gasped. All this time, their tech team quickly retrieved the card's contents, a series of encrypted files. That only made sense when combined with the coordinates from Elena's calendar. Together, they revealed a comprehensive map of Richard Holloway's secret research network, along with evidence of his international connections. But more importantly, they found a video file, dated just 6 months ago. Sarah's hands shook as Marcus helped her connect the computer to the living room's large screen. Elena's face appeared, older and tired but very much alive. She was sitting in what looked like a small apartment, sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains. My darling girl, Elena began, her voice strong despite her obvious emotion. If you're watching this, it means you've done exactly what I knew you could do. You found someone trustworthy, you've exposed the truth, and you've remembered everything I taught you about looking beyond the surface. Sarah pressed her hand against the screen, touching her mother's image. I'm safe, Elena continued. I've been documenting everything, building a case that no one can dismiss or cover up, but I couldn't contact you until I was certain it wouldn't put you in danger. Richard's network is vast, with allies in places I never expected. Coming forward too soon would have meant losing everything we've fought for. She leaned closer to the camera. But now it's time for the chrysalis to break open. Sarah, my brilliant butterfly, check the garden where we used to watch the monarchs migrate. There's a groundskeeper named Maya who has been helping me. Show her your pendant and she'll know what to do. The video ended, but Sarah was already moving, pulling on her coat. I know where she means. We used to spend every Sunday at the Butterfly Sanctuary in Central Park. Mom said it was the perfect place to learn about transformation. Marcus grabbed his keys, but Patricia blocked the door. Wait, she said. Richard may be in custody, but some of his allies are still out there. We need to be careful. She's right, Elizabeth added. Let me contact the federal task force. They can secure the area first. But Sarah's expression was determined. Mom chose now for a reason. The monarchs are migrating this week. The sanctuary will be full of visitors. We'll be safer in a crowd, and anyone watching will have trouble following us. Marcus looked at the girl who had changed his life with a simple request in the rain. She had grown so much in these few weeks, showing strength and wisdom beyond her years. You're sure about this? Sarah nodded. Mom always said, that fear of the chrysalis breaking is what keeps some butterflies from ever flying. I'm not afraid anymore. The conviction in her voice moved everyone in the room. Within minutes, they had a plan. Victoria would alert trusted security personnel. Dr. Rivera would accompany them to help manage Sarah's emotions, and Patricia would coordinate with Elizabeth to have legal teams ready for whatever came next. As they rode the elevator down to the parking garage, Sarah slipped her hand into Marcus's. Thank you, she said softly, for helping me find my wings. Marcus squeezed her hand, remembering the rainy night that had started everything. Thank you for teaching me how to use mine. They stepped out into the garage, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Sometimes the greatest transformations happen not in grand moments of triumph, but in quiet acts of trust between two people who choose to believe in each other. The Butterfly Sanctuary in Central Park was alive with visitors, all eager to witness the spectacular monarch migration. Children pressed their faces against the mesh enclosures, pointing at the orange and black wings that filled the air like autumn leaves come to life. Marcus, Sarah, and Dr. Rivera moved carefully through the crowds, trying to appear like any other group enjoying the exhibition. Sarah led them confidently, remembering the path from countless Sundays spent here with Eleanor. Maya usually works in the chrysalis chamber, Sarah whispered, heading toward a quieter section of the sanctuary. Mom said she's been here for 20 years caring for the butterflies. The chrysalis chamber was a peaceful space, its walls lined with hanging cocoons in various stages of transformation. A woman in her 60s wearing the sanctuary's green uniform was carefully monitoring the temperature controls. When she turned and saw Sarah, her eyes widened in recognition. Without a word, Sarah showed her the butterfly pendant. I've been waiting for you, Maya said softly, her weathered face breaking into a warm smile. Elena said you'd come during the monarch migration. She always believed in the power of perfect timing. Maya led them through a staff door into a small office filled with butterfly books and scientific journals. She pulled a key from around her neck and opened a filing cabinet, retrieving a sealed envelope. Your mother left this 2 weeks ago, she explained, handing it to Sarah. She said you'd know what to do with it. Inside the envelope was a single origami butterfly, folded from paper covered in Elena's distinctive handwriting. Sarah carefully unfolded it, revealing a series of numbers and letters. It's a phone number, she realized, and a time. Today at 3 p.m. Marcus checked his watch. They had 20 minutes. Maya smiled knowingly and gestured to her office phone. Use this line. It's secure. As they waited for the appointed time, Maya shared stories about Elena's visits over the past year, how she would spend hours helping tend the chrysalises, talking about Sarah, planning for the moment when truth and justice would finally align. At exactly 3 p.m., Sarah dialed the number with trembling fingers. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "My darling butterfly." Sarah's breath caught. "Mum?" "Yes, sweetheart. I'm here, and I'm coming home." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as Elena explained. She was already in New York, waiting in a safe house until federal agents confirmed that all of Richard's accomplices had been apprehended. By evening, they would be reunited. "Mr. Sterling," Elena said, "I hear you've been taking good care of my daughter." Marcus smiled, his own eyes moist. "Actually, she's been taking care of me." Elena's laugh was warm and real. "She has that effect on people. Thank you for being the person I hoped you would be, someone who could see the truth and wouldn't be afraid to fight for it." As they finished the call, Maya approached with a container. Inside was a newly emerged monarch butterfly, its wings still soft and new. "Perfect timing," Maya said. "Would you like to release it?" Sarah nodded. They moved to the sanctuary's release chamber, where Maya carefully transferred the butterfly to Sarah's palm. For a moment it sat there, adjusting to its new freedom. "Mom said that butterflies remember who they are, even after everything changes," Sarah whispered. "That's how they find their way home." The monarch's wings caught the sunlight as it took flight, joining its migrating cousins in the autumn air. Sarah watched it soar, her face glowing with joy and anticipation. Marcus stood beside her, marveling at how this remarkable child had transformed not just his life, but his entire understanding of what truly mattered. His company would rebuild, stronger and more ethical than before. His reputation would recover, shaped by integrity rather than power. But his greatest achievement would be this moment, standing beside a girl who had taught him that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open your door to someone in need, and that the truest measure of success is not what you gain, but what you give. As they left the sanctuary to prepare for Elena's return, Sarah took both Marcus's and Dr. Rivera's hands. "For you know what Mom would say about all this?" "What's that?" Marcus asked. Sarah smiled, her mother's wisdom shining in her eyes. "That sometimes it takes a whole garden of butterflies to make one miracle." The autumn sun painted Central Park in shades of gold and promise, while somewhere in the city, Elena Martinez prepared to finally come home to her daughter. The chrysalis had broken open, revealing not just one transformed life but many, all connected by a child's simple request on a rainy night. The safe house was a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, its windows warm with evening light. Sarah stood on the sidewalk, clutching Marcus's hand, her heart racing with anticipation. Federal agents had confirmed the location was secure, and Elizabeth had handled all the legal preparations for Elena's official return. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked softly. Sarah nodded, though her grip on his hand tightened. Dr. Rivera had prepared them both for this moment, explaining that reunions after long separations could be overwhelming, that it was normal to feel a mixture of joy and anxiety. Victoria Chang, who had insisted on being present to personally apologize to Elena, waited with them. Patricia had transformed the brownstone into a welcoming space, working with Dr. Rivera to create an environment that would help ease the transition. The door opened and time seemed to stop. Elena Martinez stood in the doorway, looking both exactly as Sarah remembered and somehow different. Her dark hair had touches of gray now, and new lines creased the corners of her eyes, but her smile was unchanged, bright and full of love. "My butterfly," she whispered. Sarah moved forward, slowly, almost in a trance. Then Elena opened her arms and the spell broke. Sarah ran to her mother, and they collapsed into an embrace that contained 7 years of longing, of fear, of hope, and of love. Marcus watched, his vision blurring with tears, as mother and daughter held each other, speaking in rapid Spanish, laughing and crying at the same time. He started to step back to give them privacy, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "Marcus, wait!" She turned in her mother's arms, reaching out her hand to him. "Mom, he's family now too." Elena looked at Marcus, her eyes full of gratitude and understanding. "Sarah's right. Please come in, all of you." Inside, the reunion continued in waves of emotion. Elena hugged Victoria, accepting her tearful apology with grace. She thanked Patricia for protecting her daughter and Dr. Rivera for helping Sarah process her trauma. But her gaze kept returning to Marcus. "You opened your door to her," Elena said softly, while Sarah showed Victoria her butterfly pendant. "You could have ignored her, but you didn't." Marcus smiled. "She reminded me of someone I used to know, a brilliant researcher who wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right." Elena's eyes sparkled. "I remember the day I first saw you in the research lab. You were so passionate about using technology to help people. That's why I knew you. Would listen if Sarah could reach you." "She did more than reach me," Marcus admitted. "She changed me, made me remember who I wanted to be before power and profit became everything." They watched as Sarah moved around the room, her face glowing as she shared stories with everyone. She was no longer the scared girl from that rainy night. She had blossomed into someone strong and confident, carrying both her mother's wisdom and her own hard-won resilience. "I have something for you both," Elena said, retrieving a package from another room. Inside was a framed photograph of a monarch butterfly emerging from its chrysalis, caught in that perfect moment of transformation. Below it was a handwritten quote, "The butterfly counts not months but moments and has time enough." Rabindranath Tagore. Sarah identified the quote immediately. "Mom used to read his poems to me." Elena smiled. "This photo was taken the day I decided to hide the notebook. I kept it as a reminder that sometimes we have to break apart to become something new, something stronger." She looked at Marcus. "Something more complete." As evening deepened into night, they ordered dinner and gathered around the table like a family that had always been meant to find each other. Sarah sat between Elena and Marcus, her happiness radiating like sunlight. Patricia, watching them, leaned over to Dr. Rivera. "Look at them," she whispered. "Who would have thought a rainy night and a simple act of kindness could lead to this?" Dr. Rivera smiled, knowingly. Sometimes the greatest healing happens when broken pieces find not just their original place, but new connections that make them even stronger. Outside, the Brooklyn streets hummed with life, while inside the brownstone, a new family constellation took shape. Elena shared stories of her time in hiding, working with trusted allies to document the truth. Sarah told her mother about all the ways Marcus had protected and believed in her, and Marcus listened, understanding that his life's greatest achievement wasn't the empire he'd built, but the family he'd helped restore. "Mom," Sarah said suddenly, "can Marcus stay for breakfast tomorrow? I want to show you how he makes pancakes. They're almost as good as yours." Elena laughed, the sound full and free. "Of course he can stay. In fact," she looked at Marcus with warm understanding, "I hope he'll be staying for many breakfasts to come." The simple words carried the weight of invitation, of acceptance, of family being chosen rather than just born. Marcus felt something settle in his heart. A piece he hadn't known was missing until Sarah appeared at his car window that rainy night. The following weeks brought changes both big and small. Elena and Sarah moved into a sunlit apartment near Central Park, close enough to the butterfly sanctuary for regular visits. Marcus found himself spending more and more time there, drawn by the warmth and authenticity of their small family unit. Sterling Enterprises underwent its own transformation. With Richard Holloway and his conspirators facing federal charges, the board unanimously reinstated Marcus as CEO. But his first action was to create an independent ethics committee with Elena as its head. "Are you sure about this?" Elena asked when he proposed the position. They were sitting in her new kitchen, watching Sarah help Patricia reorganize the company's charitable foundation files. "You're the most ethical person I know," Marcus replied, "and the bravest. Who better to ensure we never lose our way again?" The cartoon media loved the story of redemption and renewal. Articles praised Sterling Enterprises for embracing transparency and accountability. But the real story was happening away from the cameras, in quiet moments of connection and healing. Like the Sunday morning when Marcus arrived for breakfast to find Elena teaching Sarah advanced biochemistry at the kitchen table, or the evening when Sarah fell asleep on the couch during movie night, her head on Marcus's shoulder and her feet in her mother's lap. Dr. Rivera continued working with them, helping them navigate their unique family dynamics. "It's remarkable," she told Marcus. During one session, Sarah's showing none of the traditional trauma responses we often see in reunification cases. She's integrated both her experiences of loss and her new connections beautifully. "She's resilient," Marcus said proudly, "like her mother." "And like her father figure," Dr. Rivera added with a knowing smile. The word caught Marcus off guard, but it felt right. He had never planned on being a parent, had never imagined himself in this role. Yet somehow Sarah had carved out a space in his heart that he never knew existed. One morning, he arrived at the apartment to find Sarah and Elena surrounded by photographs and craft supplies. "We're making a family tree," Sarah explained, showing him their creation. "But not a regular one. We're making it like a butterfly garden, with different branches for different kinds of family. Not just blood relatives, but heart relatives too." Marcus's throat tightened as she pointed to a branch where she'd placed his photo, decorated, with silver and blue butterflies. "This is the branch for people who choose to love us," she said. "It's just as important as any other branch." Eleanor watched them with soft eyes. "Family is like a butterfly's migration path," she said. "It's not always the straightest line that gets you home. Sometimes it's the unexpected route that leads you exactly where you need to be." Later that week, Marcus had his own surprise for them. He took them to his penthouse where Patricia was waiting with a team of designers. "I'm thinking of moving," he announced. "This place never felt like a home until Sarah came along. Now, it feels too corporate, too cold." He handed Eleanor and Sarah each a key. "Would you help me find somewhere warmer? Somewhere with enough room for 3 people who like pancake breakfasts and butterfly gardens?" Sarah's eyes lit up. "Can we have a real garden, with flowers that attract monarchs?" "Of course," Marcus smiled. "And maybe a library for all your books and a laboratory where your mum can work from home sometimes." Elena touched his arm gently. "Marcus, are you sure? This is a big step." He looked at them both, the brilliant woman who had risked everything for truth, and the extraordinary girl who had shown him what courage really meant. "I've never been more sure of anything." That evening, they sat on Marcus's balcony, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and promise. Sarah was explaining to Patricia her ideas for the new house's garden, while Eleanor worked on preliminary plans for Sterling Enterprises' new environmental protection initiatives. Marcus looked at them, this unexpected family that had found him on a rainy night. He thought about chrysalises and transformations, about how sometimes the most beautiful changes come from moments of complete surrender to possibility. "You're smiling," Elena observed, looking up from her work. "I'm happy," he replied simply. Sarah came over and squeezed between them on the bench. "Mum," she said thoughtfully, "remember how you used to say that butterflies know their way home even after everything changes?" Elena nodded. "I think that's what happened to us," Sarah continued. "Everything changed, but we still found our way home. We just had to grow new wings first." Marcus wrapped an arm around her shoulders and Eleanor took his other hand. Together, they watched the city lights begin to twinkle like stars, each one a reminder that sometimes the most precious things in life come not from careful planning, but from opening your heart to unexpected possibilities. The Georgian brownstone. Inn Park Slope seemed to have been waiting for them. With its bay windows, spacious garden, and warm wooden interiors, it felt like home from the moment they stepped inside. Sarah immediately claimed the third-floor bedroom with the reading nook, while Elena fell in love with the sunroom that would become her home office. "The garden has southern exposure," the real estate agent explained, leading them through French doors onto a flagstone patio. "Perfect for butterfly-friendly plants." Sarah was already sketching plans on her tablet. "We can plant milkweed here and butterfly bush along the fence. Maya from the sanctuary promised to help us design it properly." Marcus, watched Elena explore the kitchen, her fingers trailing along the granite countertops. She looked more relaxed than he'd ever seen her, as if layers of tension were finally melting away. "There's a breakfast nook," she called out, smiling, "for all those pancake mornings." The decision to buy the house was unanimous. Patricia orchestrated the move with her usual efficiency, while Victoria Chang surprised them by sending a team of sustainable landscapers to help with the garden. Dr. Rivera visited regularly, now more as a friend than a therapist. "This is remarkable progress," she told them during one visit, watching Sarah and Eleanor plant butterfly-friendly flowers together. "You've created something very special here." The transformation of Sterling Enterprises was equally profound. Elena's ethics committee had real power, with direct access to the board and complete autonomy. She assembled a team of environmental scientists, human rights experts, and corporate governance specialists. "We're not just changing policies," she explained during a press conference. "We're changing the culture. Every decision, every project, every investment must now pass through an ethical framework that considers its impact on people and the planet." Sarah often accompanied them to the office after school, doing her homework in what had once been Richard's executive suite, now converted into a collaborative workspace for the ethics team. She had a gift for spotting patterns in data that even the experts missed. One afternoon, she looked up from her mathematics homework to find Marcus watching her from the doorway. "What is it?" she asked, tilting her head in that way that reminded him so much of Elena. "Just thinking about that." "Rainy night," he replied, sitting beside her. "How one small decision can change everything." Sarah smiled, reaching for the butterfly pendant she still wore. "Mom says there's no such thing as a small decision when it comes to doing the right thing." The sound of Elena's laughter drifted in from the conference room, where she was meeting with international environmental protection agencies. The warmth of it filled the space, erasing the last echoes of the cold corporate atmosphere that had once dominated these halls. Later that evening, as they walked through their garden checking on the newly planted flowers, Marcus found himself sharing a dream he'd been harboring. "I've been thinking about starting a foundation," he said, "not just for corporate giving, but something more personal, something to help children who've been separated from their families due to corporate wrongdoing or environmental disasters." Elena's eyes sparkled with interest. "A butterfly effect foundation? Small changes leading to big transformations?" "Exactly," Marcus nodded. "And I want Sarah to be part of the planning. She understands better than anyone what these children need." Sarah, who had been examining a chrysalis forming on one of the milkweed plants, turned to them with shining eyes. "Could we help them find their way home, like I did?" "That's the idea," Marcus smiled. "Every child deserves a chance to spread their wings." The garden was coming alive with the early evening activities of bees and butterflies, their wings catching the golden light. A monarch landed on Sarah's outstretched hand, its orange and black patterns brilliant against her skin. "You know what this reminds me of?" Elena said softly, watching their daughter. "That quote from your office, Marcus. The one about how real change happens." He nodded, remembering the framed words that had once seemed like mere corporate decoration. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." "We're more than a small group now," Sarah observed, gently lowering her hand as the butterfly took flight. "We're a family, and families can change the world too." As twilight settled over their garden, they moved inside to prepare dinner together, a nightly ritual that had become precious to all of them. The kitchen filled with the scents of Elena's cooking, the sound of Sarah's stories about her day at school, and Marcus's contented laughter. Through the window, they could see the first stars appearing above their butterfly garden, where new life was taking root and growing stronger every day. Just like the family inside, who had found each other against all odds and created something beautiful from the broken pieces of their past. 6 months after moving into their new home, the brownstone hosted a unique celebration. The butterfly garden was in full bloom, and the first generation of monarchs born in their yard was ready to take flight. Sarah had documented every stage of their development, creating a scientific journal that impressed even Elena's research colleagues. The gathering brought together everyone who had been part of their journey. Maya from the sanctuary provided expert guidance for the butterfly release. Patricia had organized everything with her usual attention to detail, while Victoria Chang brought a team of young environmental science students eager to learn from Elena. Dr. Rivera watched it all with professional satisfaction, noting how, naturally, the three of them moved together now, a family bonded by choice and love rather than obligation. The transformation isn't just in the garden, she observed to Elizabeth Blackwood, who had become a close friend to them all. Look at how they've grown together. Indeed, the changes were remarkable. Eleanor had reclaimed her confidence as a scientist and mother, her research now focused on positive environmental innovations. Sarah had blossomed into a poised young teenager, excelling in school and helping other children through the Foundation's programs. And Marcus had discovered a kind of happiness he'd never known existed. The corporate titan who once measured success in stock prices and market share now found his greatest joy in Sunday morning pancake competitions and helping Sarah with her science projects. "Everyone ready?" Sarah called out, gathering the group around the garden. She held a mesh enclosure containing the newly emerged butterflies, their wings still soft and new. Eleanor stood on one side of her, Marcus on the other. Together they opened the enclosure, watching as the monarchs took their first flight into the warm afternoon air. "Beautiful," Eleanor whispered, squeezing Sarah's hand. "Like watching your children leave the nest," Marcus added softly. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes bright. "But these ones will come back. The garden will always be here for them." The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The garden, like their family, had become a safe haven, a place where transformation was celebrated and new beginnings were always possible. Later, as their guests mingled over refreshments, Marcus found Elena in her home office, looking at the framed photograph of the emerging butterfly, the one she'd kept during her years in hiding. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked, joining her. "I was just thinking about cycles," she replied. "How everything in nature moves in patterns of renewal and growth. 7 years ago, I thought I was ending something by going into hiding. But really, I was just starting a new cycle, one that would lead us all here." From the garden, they could hear Sarah explaining butterfly migration patterns to Victoria's students, her voice confident and passionate. "She's so much like you," Marcus said. Elena smiled. "She's like you too, you know. That same determination to do what's right no matter the cost." She touched his arm gently. "Thank you for being her father when I couldn't be here." The word father no longer startled Marcus. It felt right, like everything else about this unexpected family they'd created. "I have something to show you both," he said, pulling out a folder. "The Foundation's first major project. We're converting some of Sterling's old research facilities into environmental education centers. Each one will have its own butterfly sanctuary." Elena's eyes widened as she reviewed the plans. "This is incredible, the impact this could have." "That's not all," he continued. "Sarah helped design the youth programs. They'll specifically support children affected by environmental displacement, giving them a chance to learn about conservation while their families get back on their feet. Like a chrysalis," Sarah said from the doorway where she'd been listening, "a safe place to transform." She joined them at the desk, and Elena pulled her into a warm embrace. "You know what this means?" Elena asked. "Your story is going to help other children write their own happy endings." Marcus watched them together, feeling the fullness in his heart that had become wonderfully familiar. Through the window, monarchs danced in the late afternoon light, their wings catching the sun like stained glass. "Sarah," he said thoughtfully, "remember what you asked me that first night in the rain?" She nodded. "I asked if I could sleep in your car. And now look at us," he gestured around them. "Sometimes the smallest requests open the biggest doors," Eleanor added softly, "and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk through them." Their garden continued to flourish as summer deepened, attracting more butterflies than they could count. But for the three people who called this house their home, the real miracle wasn't in the number of butterflies. It was in the strength of the bonds they'd formed, in the family they'd built from trust and compassion, and in the love that had transformed them all. 1 year after the butterfly garden's first blooming, the Butterfly Effect Foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. The first education center, built in what had once been one of Richard's secret research facilities, was now a beacon of hope for families affected by environmental displacement. Sarah stood at the podium during the center's first anniversary celebration, her confidence evident as she addressed the gathered crowd. At 14, she had become the foundation's youth ambassador, bringing a unique perspective to their mission. "When I was alone," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I learned that sometimes the hardest part isn't finding help, it's believing you deserve it. That's why we designed these centers to be more than just buildings. They're sanctuaries, like the chrysalis that protects a butterfly during its transformation." In the audience, Eleanor and Marcus listened with pride. The education center behind them was a testament to their shared vision, a modern facility surrounded by gardens with classrooms, research spaces, and most importantly, a state-of-the-art butterfly sanctuary that served as both educational tool and healing space. Among the day's special guests was a family Sarah had personally helped, the Ramirez, whose small farming community had been devastated by the same kind of environmental manipulation that Elena had uncovered years ago. Their daughter, Maria, had become one of the center's most dedicated students. "Sarah showed me that it's okay to start over," Maria shared during her own speech. "She taught me that every butterfly begins as something else entirely, and that change doesn't mean losing who you are. It means becoming more of who you're meant to be." The Foundation's work had attracted international attention. Environmental scientists, child psychologists, and social workers came from around the world to study their unique approach to healing and education. Dr. Rivera had developed a comprehensive therapy program that incorporated the butterfly sanctuary into the healing process. "The metaphor of metamorphosis is powerful," she explained to a group of visiting professionals. "These children have often experienced profound disruption in their lives. Watching the transformation of butterflies, understanding the process of change and renewal, it gives them a framework for their own healing journey." After the formal ceremonies, Sarah led a tour of the newest addition to the center, a research laboratory where students could study environmental science and conservation. Elena had designed the space to be both cutting-edge and accessible, a place where young minds could explore and innovate. "Mom," Sarah called out, excitement in her voice, "show them the project you've been working on with the students." Elena proudly demonstrated their latest research, a new method for tracking butterfly migration patterns that could help predict and prevent environmental disruptions. The project had been Maria's idea, inspired by her family's experience. Marcus watched from the doorway, remembering the corporate executive he'd once been, the man who measured success in profit margins and market share. Now, success looked like this: a room full of eager young scientists, led by the two remarkable women who had transformed his life. Later that evening, as they walked through the center's butterfly sanctuary, Sarah stopped to watch a newly emerged monarch testing its wings. "You know what I've learned from all this?" she said thoughtfully. "It's not just about helping people find their way home. Sometimes it's about helping them create a new kind of home, one that's better than what they lost." Elena wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "That's exactly what happened to us, isn't it?" Marcus nodded, thinking about their own journey. "We lost things too. A company's old identity, years of separation, the safety of familiar patterns. But what we found was worth more," Sarah finished, taking both their hands. "We found each other." The sanctuary's glass ceiling revealed a sky painted in sunset colors, while all around them butterflies moved in gentle patterns, their wings catching the last light of day. In one corner, Maria was showing her younger siblings how to use a microscope, her face glowing with the joy of discovery. "The Foundation's board meeting is next week," Marcus mentioned casually. "They're very interested in your proposal for expanding the youth science program." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Really? Even the international sites?" Elena smiled knowingly. "They'd be crazy not to approve it. Your research on the psychological benefits of combining environmental education with emotional healing is groundbreaking. Well, Sarah grinned, I did learn from the best. A brilliant scientist who never gave up on the truth, and a corporate leader who learned to measure success in transformed lives instead of dollar signs. The three of them stood together in the peaceful sanctuary, surrounded by the gentle flutter of wings and the quiet murmur of young voices, discovering new possibilities. Through the windows, they could see the Foundation's gardens stretching toward the horizon, a living testament to the power of transformation and renewal. You know what the best part is, Sarah said softly. Every butterfly that emerges here, every child who finds their wings, they're all part of our family's story now. A story that keeps growing, keeps changing, keeps making the world a little bit better. Marcus and Elena exchanged glances, sharing a moment of profound gratitude for the rain-soaked evening that had brought them all together. In the gathering, dusk, the sanctuary glowed like a beacon of hope, its light reaching out to touch lives they would never even know, each one a reminder that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the smallest acts of kindness. The autumn breeze carried the scent of late-blooming flowers through the open windows of their brownstones kitchen. Sarah sat at the counter, surrounded by college brochures, while Eleanor prepared her famous chamomile tea. Marcus pretended to work on his tablet, but he kept stealing glances at the university materials. You know, Sarah said, organizing the brochures into neat piles, I've been thinking about something bigger than just college. Elena and Marcus exchanged curious looks. At 15, Sarah had already accomplished more than many adults: running, youth programs at the Foundation, co-authoring research papers with Elena, and helping Marcus reshape Sterling Enterprises' approach to corporate responsibility. I want to create a scholarship program, she continued, for children like Maria and others we've met through the Foundation, not just for college, but for complete educational journeys, from environmental science summer camps all the way through graduate studies. Marcus set down his tablet. Tell me more. Sarah's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as she outlined her vision. We'll call it the Chrysalis Scholars Program. It's not just about funding, it's about creating a network of support, mentorship, and practical experience. Each scholar will be connected with researchers, environmental organizations, and corporate partners committed to ethical practices. Eleanor wrapped her hands around her tea mug, smiling. Like a butterfly effect of education, each scholar becoming a catalyst for positive change in their own community. Exactly. Sarah pulled out her notebook. She still preferred paper for her most important ideas. And here's the best part. Each scholar will help design and implement an environmental restoration project in their home community. We'll turn brain drain into brain gain. Marcus studied the preliminary plans she'd sketched out. The level of detail was impressive. From funding structures to mentorship frameworks, everything had been carefully considered. You've really thought this through, he observed proudly. I had good teachers, Sarah replied, glancing at both of them. A mother who taught me that knowledge is power, and a father who showed me that power is meant to be shared. The word father still filled Marcus's heart with warmth. Their family might not have come together in the traditional way, but its bonds were unshakable. Elena reached for Sarah's notebook, adding her own notes in the margins. We could integrate this with the research programs at the education centers, create a complete ecosystem of learning and growth. Like the butterfly gardens, Sarah nodded, every part connected, every element supporting the whole. The kitchen filled with excited discussion as they expanded on the idea. Patricia, arriving for their weekly family dinner, found them surrounded by papers and possibilities. Should I come back later? She teased, setting down the dessert she'd brought. No, stay, Sarah exclaimed. We need your organizational genius. We're planning something big. As Patricia joined their planning session, the autumn sun painted the kitchen in warm gold. Through the window they could see their butterfly garden, where late-season monarchs still danced among the flowers. Maya had been right. The garden had become a permanent way station for migrating butterflies, a place of rest and renewal on their long journeys. You know what this reminds me of? Marcus said, watching a monarch land on the window's flowering vine. That night in the rain, you asked for shelter in my car, but what you really did was open a door to something much bigger. Sarah smiled, touching her butterfly pendant, now a symbol not just of her connection to Elena, but of their entire family's journey. Mom always said that the right question can change everything. I just didn't know then how many lives would be changed. Elena reached across the counter to squeeze her daughter's hand. And now you're making sure those changes keep spreading, keep growing, like ripples in a pond, or like butterflies in the wind, Sarah finished, each one carrying seeds of transformation wherever they go. Outside, the garden caught the last rays of sunlight, its flowers glowing like stained glass. Inside, 4 people who had become family continued planning a future built on hope, science, and the unwavering belief that every person deserves a chance to spread their wings. Marcus looked at them all. Elena, whose courage had started everything. Sarah, whose simple request had changed his life. Patricia, whose loyalty had never wavered. He thought about the hundreds of children already helped by their foundation and the thousands more who would be reached through Sarah's scholarship program. You know what makes this really special, he said softly. It's not just about creating opportunities. It's about showing people that transformation is possible, that no matter where you start, you can become something beautiful. Sarah leaned against him, her mother's arm around her shoulders, their kitchen warm with love and possibility. Like a butterfly, she asked, smiling. Like a butterfly, he agreed, and like a family that found each other in the rain. The Sterling Martinez home buzzed with excitement on a bright summer morning. Sarah's Chrysalis Scholars program was celebrating its first graduation ceremony, and the house was filled with the scent of Elena's special occasion coffee cake and the sound of last-minute preparations. At 16, Sarah had grown into a poised, young woman who balanced her roles as student, foundation leader, and inspiration to others with remarkable grace. Today she would give the keynote speech at the ceremony, addressing the first class of scholars who had completed their environmental leadership training. Nervous? Marcus asked, finding her in the garden where she often went to think. Sarah shook her head, watching a monarch flutter among the flowers they'd planted together years ago. Not nervous, just thinking about how far we've all come. The garden had matured beautifully, becoming a model for the butterfly sanctuaries now established at every Butterfly Effect Foundation center around the world. Local environmental groups often brought students to learn about conservation, and Elena used it for hands-on research demonstrations. Remember when this was all empty space? Sarah gestured at the thriving ecosystem around them. Now look at it. Every plant, every butterfly, every visitor who finds peace here, they're all part of something bigger than themselves. Marcus sat beside her on the garden bench that had hosted so many family conversations, just like our family. Inside, they could hear Elena on the phone with Patricia, coordinating last-minute details for the ceremony. The Foundation's main education center would host hundreds of guests, including environmental leaders, corporate partners, and families whose lives had been touched by their work. Maria's project in her hometown is already showing results, Sarah said proudly, referring to her first friend from the Foundation. The restoration work she designed has brought butterflies back to an area that hadn't seen them in decades. Marcus smiled, remembering the scared young girl who had arrived at their center years ago. Now Maria was a confident environmental scientist, leading her own team and mentoring new scholars. You gave her more than just education, he said. You gave her what you found that night in the rain, a chance to become something new without losing who she was. Sarah's eyes grew thoughtful. That's what I want to talk about in my speech today. How transformation isn't about leaving everything behind. It's about carrying the best parts of your past into a better future. Eleanor appeared in the garden doorway, radiant in a blue dress that matched the morning glory vines climbing the trellis. Ready to go. The first guests will be arriving soon. As they gathered their things, Sarah paused by the butterfly-shaped wind chimes that Maya had given them years ago. Their gentle music had become the soundtrack of countless family moments. You know what makes today really special, she said, looking at her parents. It's not just about the scholars graduating. It's about proving that one act of kindness can grow into something that changes the world. Elena wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, like a butterfly's wings creating ripples that travel across oceans. Exactly, Sarah nodded. Every time someone chooses to help instead of turn away, to listen instead of ignore, to believe in possibility instead of accepting defeat, they're creating their own butterfly effect. Marcus watched them together, still amazed by how perfectly they complemented each other. Elena's scientific brilliance and unwavering integrity, Sarah's compassionate vision and natural leadership. And somehow he had found his own place in their story, learning that true success was measured not in profits, but in lives transformed. As they drove to the ceremony, the city streets were lined with summer flowers, many planted by Foundation volunteers as part of their urban renewal initiative. Each splash of color represented another small victory in their ongoing mission to heal both environments and the people who depended on them. "I had a dream last night," Sarah said suddenly. "I was standing in our garden, but it had grown so big it covered the whole city. Every butterfly that took flight carried a seed of change to somewhere new, and in the dream, I knew that even after we're gone, the changes we started would keep growing." Elena reached back to squeeze her hand. "That's not just a dream, sweetheart. That's a legacy." Marcus added softly, "And it all started because you were brave enough to ask for help on a rainy night." Sarah smiled, touching her ever-present butterfly pendant. "No, it started because you were kind enough to say yes." The education center came into view, its modern architecture softened by climbing vines and flowering plants. Hundreds of butterflies danced in the gardens surrounding the building, a living testament to nature's resilience and beauty. Inside, the first chrysalis scholars waited to receive their certificates and begin their own journeys of transformation. Each one carried a story of challenge and change, of obstacles overcome and dreams rekindled. But more importantly, each one carried the understanding that had become the Foundation's core truth, that sometimes the greatest acts of courage come, disguised as simple requests, and the most powerful changes begin with a single moment of kindness.